Okay, so messing around with the Outlander, it did awesome this weekend, but I want some more ground clearance in the rear. So if you look at that axle angle right there, that's the factory at full down travel. But there's plenty more travel in the suspension and the axle. As you can see, I can drop it down an inch at the shock, which is probably 1.5 inches because the motion ratio may be a little bit more at the wheel. So I can lift this thing at least 1.5 inches, and I can add extra down travel in the back. Adding extra down travel is important because when you start to get high centered, the wheel will drop down into the rut another 2 inches if I do a mod like a bracket lift or something here. So I got to find a way to make this shock longer to take advantage of that extra travel. All right, so the first thing I did was cut and grind a few little pieces of metal off in order to get that flat, because it used to look like that piece, the back. Now I got it flat. So now a piece of steel will sit flat against it. Now I just got to measure the distance between these two holes. It's about 37 millimeters. Okay, now I'm going to take this metal, make a little bracket, bolt it in there with one side over here, one side right here, put a bolt with the space between it, torque all that down, put a few tack welds, it's good to go. All right, so I just fabbed up, almost fabbed up 4 little brackets. I made one and then I laid it on there and I stenciled it, drilled 8 holes, and I just got to cut them off with the cutoff wheel. And that'll be the little bracket for the little lift. Doesn't look like much lift, but again, there's a motion ratio, right? So 1 inch at the shock is usually 2 inches at the wheel or so. I'm also moving the shock out, which is going to increase stiffness. So yeah, it'll be about a 2 inch lift. I just got to cut these out, bolt them on, and then tack weld them in place. Okay, so here's how my brackets look installed. Looks okay if you ask me. I've just measured from the hub to the fender, and it's exactly a 1 7/8 inch change in down travel. And because the shock moved out a little bit, again, it'll probably be right about 2 inches of lift because we added some leverage to make our spring rate slightly higher effectively. Obviously, I can adjust the preload to set ride height. But if you stopped right here and you hit your first bump, this would just fold over, right? So now I'm gonna weld around here and weld around here and back here. And then it'll be 100%. So yeah, also make sure you put a spacer down here, right? Because you don't want to be squeezing these tabs together. That spacer is under compression, so it's helping hold everything nice and straight. Yeah, pretty sweet. I moved the shock back a little bit, which actually helps with the alignment of this bushing at full down travel, which is where I'm going to be most of the time with this type of suspension setup with my lift kit. So yeah, the reason I'm doing this is because there's no bracket lift available for the back. I already have a little bit of lift in the front with these CS3 arms. I don't want to go too crazy with the front lift because you have to steer and you'll break CV joints in reverse and stuff. But I find that the rear lift, because there's no steering back here, you can actually max out the CVs a little bit more. So let me show you what the CV angles look like. Pretty big difference. So yeah, we'll see if I break CVs now, but Can-Am axles are generally pretty good, so I feel okay about it. All right, so right as I got it done, the way I was gonna do it, over here, someone asked, is it possible to do without welding? And I started looking at it and I thought, yes, it is possible. So I'm running 2 different methods here. So this one, it's the same tabs for the actual lift. I welded a brace over here to support it from rocking out, because that's what happens when you bottom out the suspension. This compresses triangles, it pushes that way a lot. So this, to cancel that force out, I added this. It's also welded around here everywhere I could. I had that done, and someone on Patreon said, I'd like to see if we could do it without using a welder. And I said, well, this lower knuckle bolt is a great location for a piece of flat bar. So I have flat bar going from up there down to the lower knuckle bolt with a spacer to keep this nice and straight, right? Because it makes it stronger. Yes, you could use thicker steel and make this stronger. Yes, you could put a little piece of angle iron or even C-channel or something cool like that there. This is probably going to be plenty strong enough. It's just an ATV, it doesn't need to be that hardcore. You do have to have a longer bolt here and a longer bolt here in order to make this work. But luckily, I had all that stuff laying around. So yeah, it looks goofy as hell. It's the same amount of lift on both sides. It's just a different way to support the bracket. So if you see a lot of the lift kits, like the little ones you get for like the old Honda 300s, these sort of things, a lot of times they have a bracket to keep this from rotating. This is really thin stuff, but basically that's what I did here, except this is actually pretty strong, and the metal I used is thicker than you get on most bracket lifts. So yeah, if you want to try this, of course, proceed at your own risk. If you want to bring me your XMR 700 or Gen 3 Outlander to have one of these installed, I can do this way, or I can do the welded way. This probably looks a little cleaner. I got to make sure it clears the wheel and everything, but I'm pretty sure it'll be fine with the 14-inch wheel. I'll check with the stock wheel, and obviously it's going to clear my 18s. But once you do this lift, by the way, recommend running some rear wheel spacers to get your stability back, because you're going to drop down farther. Bike's going to be taller and skinnier wheelbase. So yeah, I think it came out pretty good. I went digging out my factory tires just because I figured this was going to be the case. So whenever you lift something, you move the shock out a little bit, there's a chance it's going to hit the tire. So if you want to run the factory wheels, which are kind of fat, you need to run a 1-inch wheel spacer in order to clear the shock and everything after you do this mod. You could move the bottom of the shock over this way instead of out, but then you're not going to get the stiffness benefit of the lift by giving the shock better leverage against the control arm. Basically, I changed the motion ratio a little bit by doing this, and it's going to make it not squat so bad when I hit the throttle in thick mud. But yeah, run a 1-inch wheel spacer or your tires can rub the shock. All right, my rear 2-inch lift is complete. It's actually, I just measured it again after rolling it back and forth and stuff. It's actually almost 2.5 inches the way it's sitting right now. And that's because I have the preload pretty maxed out, so I might let that down a little bit. But yeah, so it's pretty tall. Came out pretty good. It's all painted up, and made it a little bit stiffer, but a lot more down travel. So now hopefully when I get in the mud, I'm loaded down, I hit the gas, I'm not squatting out completely all the time. I did add 1-inch wheel spacers, so you can see that right now it's totally square. I don't make my bikes any wider than that, or my quads, because you just get more mud on you and it puts more stress on everything else. But yeah, coming along. I need to wash it. That's the next project for today. And then I'm going to throw some 1-inch wheel spacers on the front as well to help with the front rubbing, because the stupid S3 arms didn't do it for me. I would have just bought the S3 rear arms that had the lift built in, but I was so disappointed with how they installed on the front, and I hated the bushings, that I went ahead and made my own bracket lift. I think it came out pretty sharp. So that one is all bolt-on, and this one is all welded, doing the science, because someone asked for a bolt-on version. I like to weld stuff. I think the bolt-on side came out cleaner anyway, but yeah, it looks really mean on them 33s. Those 33s right now have about 2 PSI, maybe 3 PSI in them, and it's still got big time ground clearance. Let me show you how much. The old tape measure. This is always super fun to do with one hand. So right under the hitch, we're sitting at about 20, but at the lowest part, we're sitting at about 18.25 inches of ground clearance with stock axles, stock arms, just a homemade bracket lift, and 33-inch Aztecs.